What's up, fam? Welcome back to another episode of EXTOL WE. And this week, I have more extras than I could shake a stick at, and Jesus is my ordinary. Family, I sat down with Charlotte on Christmas and talked her through all of the events that happened on Christmas Eve this year. We got done. She said, honey, if it was just one thing in that litany of things that you told me, that would be incredible. But honey, that's a lot. I can't agree more, friends. It's so incredibly beautiful to see what Jesus is doing, working together with me to impart grace to you so that you can know the Father more. The video that went live 3.5 years ago in the past was "And All Samaria," and then the video that went live this Christmas Eve at 10:50 a.m. was "Beers with Jesus." Friends, is so incredibly beautiful seeing what God did in the fulfillment of that prophetic word that my pastor Michael at C3, my faith family, preached a sermon on Matthew 1:18 through 21, which coincidentally my girls memorized that whole passage. They've been working on it for 4 to 6 weeks, finished their verse, and we posted that on Saturday, December 23rd, the day before, and then he preached his sermon the very next day on Matthew 1:18 through 21. And in his sermon, one of his points was that if we'll press in to see Jesus within the lowly things, within the offensive things, and not shy away from him, that we'll discover Jesus yet today in difficult and unlovely things. As he was preaching it, I was just sitting there about ready to burst because I knew that my video was just sitting there waiting to go live at 10:50 a.m. MST right at the end of his sermon. Oh my goodness, my cheeks are cramping, and I'm not just now 2 minutes into this video. We finish out service, and I was getting ready to go and celebrate communion at where Emmett's hobo camp was, on the corner of Fowler and Huffine. As I was going out, my friend Katie meets me and says, I wanted to give you and Charlotte a Christmas gift. I baked this sourdough loaf of bread for you guys. Oh my word, friends. I had not brought bread with me or wine to celebrate communion. I was going to go and get them at a convenience store. But here, my friend Katie comes with this beautiful expression of fresh baked sourdough bread. It's so delicious. Thank you so much, Katie. Walk out of our meeting hall at C3 into the parking lot, and there's just fog everywhere. It's the first time I've ever seen fog coming out of our meeting hall. And as I did, I became very aware of these high power lines that run right along Jackrabbit, that they're just buzzing and crackling because of the moisture that's in the air. First time that I've ever heard that. As I'm walking to my car, parked clear on the other side of the parking lot, I had to go by myself. My little ones were sick, and so my wife Charlotte was at home. So I parked clear on the other side to give other families a closer place to park. As I'm getting close to where I'm parking, our youth pastor, Aaron, is coming back from his car. As soon as I see him, this prophetic revelation drops into my mind. And I said, Aaron, don't curse the fog that prevents you from being able to see what's ahead and not realize that the fog is helping your senses to become aware to the power that is in the air, that's hanging close, that you can feel the static against your cheeks, and that God is helping you become more aware of that. He said, you crazy man, come here, give me a hug, love you. I went and got in my car. As I get in my car, I don't often have my ringer on. I'm glad that no notifications came through in service, but my phone dings to tell me that my video went live 10:50 a.m. Oh, so beautiful. I drive to the convenience store then on the corner of Jackrabbit and Valley Center, walk in and buy a Mike's Cranberry Hard Lemonade, stone cold. Absolutely no chagrin in my heart at all as I'm seeing what the Lord is doing. I'm partnering with him. I'm seeing what he's doing. I'm feeling the power in the air, and I'm bold as a lion buying a Mike's Hard Lemonade at 11 a.m. come out, get in my car, and I'm going to then go to the corner of Fowler and Huffine to celebrate communion. I'm going to go right, jump on Jackrabbit, but God says, nope, take a left, go down Valley Center. Go down Valley Center, and when I get to Love Lane, he says, take a right and go down to Huffine. As I jump onto Love Lane, that he just begins to speak to my heart about this fog. It was heavy enough that I wasn't overdriving my headlights, but definitely not seeing much farther than just in front of my car. Power lines along the right-hand side again, and I can see the light burning through the fog. So it's pretty low-hanging fog. I can see the sun pretty hot coming through. The light is breaking through, and God starts speaking to my heart about staying on the straight and narrow way of love, that he provides light for our feet and a lamp for our path. The next step right in front of us and just ahead to keep going forward on this straight way of love. And as I came then to Huffine, he says, stand at the crossroads and ask for the ancient paths. And as soon as I got the green light and I turned left, friends, I break out onto the highway of the Lord, the straight and narrow highway of the Lord, wide highway, perfectly clear, no fog at all. I look back and Love Lane is completely covered in fog, clear down to where I came from off of Baxter. Oh my goodness, God is just lighting me up. Come to the corner of Fowler and Huffine, and there's a lady standing there with a cardboard sign asking for money, and the sign says, never give up. I'm just incredulous. Pull into the construction yard where they're building this extended stay luxury hotel on this land where Emmett's hobo camp had been. When I went and did the footage for Beers with Jesus, I took out my phone and I put down a pin right where his hobo camp was, and I saved it all these years on that video. I pulled that back up and started walking forward, and as I looked forward from my memory and just the orientation of around, I was like, I think that building is setting right on top of where his hobo camp was. And if it is, I'm like, I'm not going to go into that building. But I was like, I think it's going to be really close. As I get to the pin, friends, his hobo camp was like 6-7 feet off of the wall of where that building is built. I went back with my drone and got some footage from above the side. I stomped down an X into the snow and put some rocks down so you can see right where it is. And his hobo camp is literally just outside the wall of this massive structure with numerous rooms to stay in. Family, I sat down and started listening to Beers with Jesus and was taking communion with my Mike's Hard Lemonade and this delicious homemade sourdough bread. And as I did, God starts dumping prophetic revelation and insight into my life. As I took Emmett out to the rest center where there was a warm space for him to be, he was 19 cents short when he went to buy us bread and beers to have communion, to break bread together. I covered the 19 cents and I funded his pathway on 19th Avenue with the 19 cents short that he was. Jesus started speaking to how he was the hobo, that though he was equal with God, he did not grasp equality with God, but that he came to his own and his own received him not. The foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. That Jesus came and dwelt as a hobo, someone who was despised. There was nothing in him that we should be attracted to him, that he's just stumbling through life, stumbling and bumbling, that he left this amazing place with houses and cars and boats and the cushy life, but that he came to his own and his own received him not. And that as he progressed to the cross, that he came up short in his strength to be able to get his cross to the hill that he was to die on, that Simon of Cyrene came along with him, shouldered the cross and helped him get to his finish line. That was the last time that I've ever seen Emmett, and that he put his hand on my chest and said, I want your life to continue. And that here I was then, sitting in his resting place where he had built his home, that he formed a testimony in the earth there. And I was sitting right in that spot, sharing communion at his start line with this massive extended stay luxury hotel being built behind me. Family, as I sat in that space then, I began to receive this conviction in the confrontation of "and all Samaria." That there's so many of us who, in our journey to where we're going to fellowship with our family of faith, that we intentionally drive around meeting places that we're like, but not there. I will take definite pains to drive around that place. And that God started then bringing back the conversation that Jesus had with the woman at the well, where she was a Samaritan, said, hey, you Jews say we're supposed to worship on this mountain, and we Samaritans say we're supposed to worship on that mountain. Now, what do you say? And Jesus said, the time is coming, woman. The time is coming when the true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. And that then his prayer for us in the high priestly prayer of John 17 said, Father, make them one as you and I are one. And that I began to be convicted in that I'm sitting in a hobo camp that is 7 feet outside the wall of this massive structure. And that Jesus began to say, Elijah, I poured out my life unto death, that I paid the price with my blood, with my life laid down to purchase the inheritance of the bride, the dwelling place of God, the church that I am building such that the Spirit can fill with the fullness of him who fills all things. I am building the dwelling, and I want your life to continue. Never give up. I have built a dwelling for y'all to go into, to celebrate in loving surrender to one another, in deep enjoyment, receiving the grace from one another, exercise to please the Father's heart, to impart grace to one another so that you can know him more. But you can't camp 7 feet outside the wall. Friends, as I was sitting there, that God began to remind me of other things that Emmett had told me. That Emmett, as I thought about it, I don't think it was public land. I think it was county land. And as I was asking Emmett, what's it like being a hobo in Bozeman? He said, well, I have experienced some hard things. That he had city law enforcement that showed up, that confronted him and said that he had to get off that land. He'd done his research and he said, you have no jurisdiction here. You're city law enforcement and this is county. And so you should probably take off and stop pestering me. It got heated, and Emmett said that he was being arrogant, that he was being very testy because he knew where he was standing and he knew his rights, but he said he was disrespecting authority, and that he said, call your supervisor down here. And so they had a county sheriff come down. County sheriff verified, yep, he is okay to be on this land. How long have you been here? And sent the city law enforcement packing and then said, have a good night, sir, and left. Emmett left his camp, but when he came back to his camp, his sleeping bag had been cut up, his tent had been torn down, his whole camp had just been ripped up, and he was super mad. But then all of a sudden the thought came. He said he left the grove, sat down in the field, the open field that was behind it to the west, looked up at the stars, and said that he was convicted in his heart that he had disrespected his authority. Said it wasn't right that happened, but that he was incorrect in disrespecting the authority in this region. And as I sat and I remembered that there's so many people that say we're sitting in our space, this is our camp. This is where we've put our roots, right here. And they're disrespecting the authority of Jesus that says, come into the celebration in the house that I have made for you. You don't get to walk around the dwelling place that I have made because you don't like it. Friends, as we've done that, we've disrespected our authority, and we've invited the pushback of darkness to tear up our lives, to tear up our comfort, to tear up our dwellings, to tear up what we've created, because we have disrespected the authorities in the region that we're in. Friends, Emmett, while he encouraged me, was in his person was very offensive. When I picked him up, he was stumbling because there was snow, but he was also stumbling because he was drunk. I asked him if he had been drinking. He said yes. He said, man's got to do something to stay warm. He was drunk. He got into my car, fortunately said to leave the windows down and the heat off so that he didn't overheat and get too hot once he got out of my car. But I was also glad because he was incredibly rank. I have no idea how long it had been since he had showered. And I honestly wondered if my seats would be ruined forever and if they would always stink. But as I stayed with him for 4 hours and continued to extend the grace and the love to him that I would to Jesus, that I was accepting and receiving him as I would Jesus, to say, what do I have to impart to him that is coming through me? And then vice versa, to say, God, what do you have for me through him that you are imparting to him? That as I stayed in that space for 4 hours with him, that I received a prophetic word from him through the laying on of hands that Jesus imparted to my life to encourage me in the good works that God had for me to do. Family, it's the exact same way in the body of Christ. That in my life, I am Emmett to so many of you in my family, that my personal preferences, how I live my life, my hygiene, my way of life is so incredibly offensive to you that it makes it very difficult for you to be with me, to worship God together with me in the dwelling place that Jesus has built for us, because you're just stumbling all over in who I am and how I walk through life. But family, as we extend grace to one another to say, how is this person serving to please my Father's heart? And what grace is coming to them, to come through them, to come to me so that I can know the Father more? That as we extend that grace to one another and we go into the dwelling place, that's where the magic happens, friends. As I sat there and God is pouring all of these things through my heart, that he said, get up and walk around this building. I took off from the X and he said, do not extend 1 foot past the other. Heel never passes toe. I walked her all the way around the building. It took forever. I felt so silly. But as I was finishing again at the X of Emmett's camp, that God revealed to my heart, because of the manner in which I walked, that everywhere I set my foot, that he was giving to me, and that I was not leaving any penetration through that boundary. Nothing was going out, nothing was coming in, and was being sanctified for his pleasure, for the dwelling place of his people. That as I came back around then and sat down in that X, that he had one final invitation for me. That in Matthew it says that Jesus tells a parable about the kingdom of heaven as a wedding celebration, that the king he's killed the fattened calves, everything's barbecued, everything's ready, and he sends out his servants to invite the subjects in to celebrate at the wedding celebration. But that the people said, nah, I'm okay, and went out to plowed their field. Another one left to go work on his business. And then others gave the servants the business, beat them up and killed them. And the master said, are you kidding me? And so sent out his forces to then deal with them forcefully and to cut them off, and said, no, but there must be people at my celebration, and said, go out to the corners and gather in whoever you find there. That as they pulled them in, that he then saw someone in the wedding feast who was not wearing their wedding clothes, and said, friend, how did you get in here as a hobo dressed in those kind of clothes? And it says that then he was tied and kicked outside of the celebration. Family, I've been so confronted and convicted that we go to those who are lost, who are outside of the family of God, and say, Jesus in his flesh has created one new humanity, that he's tore down every dividing wall of hostility and created one new humanity in himself, that if we're in him, we're new creations. Behold, all things have been made new. They've passed away. We no longer think of anyone from a worldly point of view, but that we will think of them as Christ. That if we cannot go into the dwelling that Jesus has paid to establish, to be built up, to house the fullness of the Holy Spirit for the pleasure of our Father, because those that we see are smelly, they're not doing life right, they're not being responsible, their worship is not acceptable because it's not over here on this mountain. It needs to be over here on this mountain where it's approved. But that we can't see the promise for the trees, that Jesus, in having dwelt in a place of despised lowliness, that he came to his own and his own received him not, that he had no place to lay his head, even though he is the King of glory, and that he dwelt among us, and that he came out, and that he went to the hill that he was to die on, and that people came alongside of him, shouldered his cross, and got it the full way, that they finished his pathway down 19th Avenue, and that he has placed a hand on those who have loved and accepted him and said, I want your life to continue as my own. Now go and dwell within the building, the dwelling place that I am building with you for the glory and the pleasure of my Father. Don't be satisfied to live in the hobo camp just outside of the walls of the extended stay luxury dwelling with room upon room upon room upon room of comfort and beauty and opulence and celebration that's being built on the land that was sanctified by the pouring out of Jesus's blood. Don't be a hobo outside the walls of the dwelling place that is being built to house the fullness of the Holy Spirit. And likewise, don't go into the dwelling without wearing the robes of righteousness imparted to us. A mentor, Tim, years and years ago said, Elijah, do you know how you define a congregation? A multitude of sins covered, son. Friends, communion is being provided for us, the common unity of the saints in a dwelling place that God is building in and through the living stones of us upon Jesus, the cornerstone. Communion is being invited with us to come in to be with Jesus and to break bread with him and to go from a place of having burning hearts with him on the road to sitting at the table with him, recognizing him in the fullness of who he is. If you subscribe to what we are doing, then hit the button, hit it, and then get it. Hit the bell as well so you get notified with the new content. And if you loved this video, you didn't just like it, and hit the thumbs down button. Pray blessings on all of our lives together. I love you guys lots, and I will see you in the next video.